Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Pleased to see each and every one of you. It doesn't surprise me that most of the chairs have filled. They generally do when the African AI falls into a session. And I'm really excited to introduce you to today's panelists. We have with us Rob Childs. He has over 2 decades of experience leading enterprise transformation in regulated industries, most recently at Ameren. He oversaw a $2 billion portfolio spanning a digital enablement, grid modernization, and cybersecurity. He previously held senior technology roles at Rogers Communications and Public Sapient. Next, we have Shanti Greene. He is the head of data science and AI innovation at AnswerRocket. Shanti leads the data science team at AnswerRocket, building the AI agents, and models behind the enterprise client deployments. He previously led AI and data strategy at InfoSeps and Dowity, and teaches graduate analytics at Washington University. Next, we have Andy Sweet, Vice President of Enterprise AI Solutions, also from AnswerRocket. Andy leads AnswerRocket's enterprise AI practice, helping Fortune 500 clients move from AI pilot to production. He founded Cognitive Spark, a data science consultancy acquired by AnswerRocket, and previously held CTO and AI leadership roles at IBM, Perficient, Ameren, and Dowry. And I'm Michelle Hamilton. I am the AI adoption and change management practice lead, also with AnswerRocket. I lead AnswerRocket's change management practice, helping enterprises close the gap between AI investment and workforce adoption. I previously founded Spark AI Strategy and AI Class Lab. Now I'm the chairman of their board. And I brought 30 years of commercial real estate leadership experience previous to that. So having this panel together gives you 4 very different perspectives, really in thinking about how AI success is going to be requiring working together. We have IT expertise, AI expertise, data, and AI change management. We have all 4 on the stage today, and I'm excited to get us started. Before we do, how many of you in this room are from the IT side of the strategy? I love that. How many from the business side? We're good. Okay. How many are working on an AI initiative right now? Great. Finally, how many have something in production that is changing how the business operates day to day? Okay. Outstanding. All right, panelists. Now that you've known the audience a little bit better, they know you a little bit better. Let's dive into the question. Rob, this first one is for you. There is a misconception that AI is a zero-sum game. Cut costs, reduce headcount, but the organizations scaling AI are leading with growth. That shift only happens when the business is driving it. Why can't IT do this alone?
Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that there's at least 2 people in this room who think that the business should lead a lot of the IT transformation, right? And, if you think about it, obviously we technologists get very excited. You guys have all put your, careers and probably academic experience, at hand to build technology products. But as I've talked to my teams over many years, technology products in and of themselves are not really a thing, right? It really is only beneficial and valuable to the customer or the organization or shareholders when that thing becomes valuable to the business. It's part of the business. And when we talk about the growth side of where the AI trajectory it really kind of goes back to old school thinking around business process redesign, embedding AI capabilities into those processes, which really gets to, a lot of what your role is about, change management. how do we adopt this new way of working, this different kind of operating model, to really take advantage of the excitement and I think the real promise that AI can bring to bear.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Andy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, let me just kind of build around on what you said. Just really quick first, AnswerRocket is a global AI consultancy that works across industry. We have expertise in CPG, construction, but really across the board in healthcare. And what's interesting is, having said that, we're building a presence here in St. Louis. Last year, we were at this conference. We had 2 employees in St. Louis. Right now, we have 15. We're looking to grow to 30. So I just want to kind of give you a sense of what we're seeing and why we could talk about the things we're about to talk about. And I think it's a great question. And, technology and business partnership has always been a topic. AI is not unique in that way. But what makes AI very, very different is the fact that it transforms how business gets done, how decisions are made, what decisions humans make, what decisions are automated through AI, and then which ones where humans and AI work together. And so understanding that balance and then understanding the impact. And the last thing I would just quickly say, we see clients all the time, start with the AI versus what is the business outcome? What are we trying to achieve? And that hasn't changed. Again, AI hasn't changed that fundamentally, but starting with that outcome, delivering on that outcome, and using that as the North Star is critically important. So I love the question, Michelle. And I think that idea, no matter where we sit in the organization, whether it's technologists like us or in the business, is starting with that outcome, and not at some high level, very measurable outcome. We can talk about that a little bit more, that is very specific to what you're trying to drive in your business.
I think the difference we see now is the direction that change is being pressured from. So previously, when we think about tools that might increase efficiency, might make the business run better, a lot of that was driven from IT. They'd say, hey, we've seen these tools, we know they can make them better. Business was slow to adopt some of those tools. They didn't necessarily want them. I remember building something, came in to do a microservices transformation, take out the internals of how a bunch of systems were, replace them. Business did not care. They ran better, they were more efficient, but wasn't that interesting. Now the business is saying, we're demanding these new tools. We're going to be using them, so get on board and don't get in the way. So it's time to have a much stronger collaboration than we've seen in the past, where one group would say, we should do this thing, and I'm like, I don't know that I want to. Well, now one group saying, you have to do this thing. We're measuring results. This is going to happen. So figure out the policies around it, figure out how to regulate it, make it safe for us to do it because we're going to be doing it. And I don't think there's an option to sit and think about it like there used to be.
I agree with you on that, but I'm also going to push back a little bit and say that seems to be where most organizations are thinking about. Where IT is coming in is also then working directly with the employees on their key deliverables, their KPIs. What are they responsible for doing, and how can we help add an AI lens to that? Utilizing the exact language that they're already using, not asking them to adopt a technology vernacular, but literally learning how to use a personal assistant type product in order to assist them to do their job, not replace them, but simply make them more efficient.
Just maybe one quick point though on that, Michelle, is I agree with what you're saying, but back to what Shanti talked about. There is that demand coming from the business side, and that can come because of, their boards. It could come from other stakeholders, other leaders could be pressuring it just because they see AI as such a phenomenon. Everyone's like, you must adopt. But it's still the same conversation that we as technologists always have. They're going to come to you and say, yes, use AI. And you're going to say, to achieve what outcome? And then they'll say, well, tell me what it does. What does AI do, right? So you're still back to the same fundamental conversations about, how the functionality is developed and how can you enable functionalities with use of technology.
I love that. I was talking to Siemens yesterday, and they said they are now holding their employees responsible for their AI use and ROI, yet they have provided them zero training and how to actually use the AI, which was why I was meeting with them. And it, to me, is such an interesting perspective because previously we never thought about it from a humanization standpoint. Now we all get to work together. I love that.
Yeah, I think we're also seeing, 3 years ago, sometimes there'd be a mandate like, you need to use AI. Okay, can do that. Is there a particular problem we should be trying to solve, or just apply some technology here? And the answer was apply some technology here, which is never the right answer to a question. But now we're finally seeing, here are some business problems that we're pretty sure we could solve them by applying this technology, which is the right direction to think about there. What are the pressing problems for my business? Is there a way to apply this technology to solve them? And maybe there is, and not every problem has an AI solution, as much as I like to think that they do. But a good number will have AI solutions or AI assisted solutions in some way.
That's a perfect lead into my next question regarding what does success look like. So, Hannah, I want you to think about the most impactful AI or digital innovation that you've been a part of or really have an opportunity to see up close. Not necessarily the biggest budget, but the one that changed how business operates. What was it and what made it different? Andy, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on the last question, lead right into this. Where what success looks like is when you have a framework, and I really would encourage everybody as you're. It sounds like most people are underway, but have a framework of what these solutions are. There's a bucket that we call personal productivity, and I think it's critically important to enable your organization to leverage your model of choice to be more effective and more productive as an individual human than at a team level and then organizational level. The most rewarding one I've been involved with happens to be here in town, AB InBev, and working with their strategic insights group. One of the challenges they have is, as we all know, or at least as I well know, they have a lot of products, right? And so a lot of products, a lot of geographies, and it takes a certain amount of human time to understand the market dynamics. And they're really good at understanding North America, South America, key markets, and then key brands like Budweiser, Bud Light. But they have all these other brands and geographies. And what we're able to do is extend humans and extend that strategic insight group using agents so they operate on these other geographies, these other opportunities. And I think that's a huge place for AI in where you can spot opportunity and be creative. Not look at it as a cost-cutting technology, but a way to expand human abilities to make decisions in a business. So concrete example here in St. Louis.
I love that. Now, obviously coming from recently working with Ameren, do you have any examples from there or from some of your other roles?
Yeah, I do. And it's a great question to think through because, as Andy said, it's really about getting the framework right, right? How do you work together? And I want to emphasize the working together. As I mentioned, in my comment a little while ago about the trade-off of the back and forth working relationship between, let's call it IT and business, just to simplify it. I know those roles and distinctions don't mean a whole lot when you build a team, and that's really the team aspect that's important. So in the hallway before this session began, I ran into a director at Ameren who leads up, basically contact service or customer operations. And together we led a program on bringing in Salesforce Service Club. And why was that important? It's not necessarily about the technology. It was about getting all the contact center agents on one front end, right? Could have been a different technology, but we picked this one. And that was a forcing function for them to think about all the disparate processes that existed in the world around serving the customer. How do you get to one set of processes? And then, how do you enable that through technology? But then using, scaled agile, there are a lot of scaled agile folks in the room or agile folks, product teams. I hope the hands go up. I hope there's more hands over time, right? I encourage it. I don't care if you call it Wagile or Fragile. It doesn't have to be from a pure standpoint, the perfect product model. What's really important is getting folks in the right roles to work and talk together so that you have practitioners, in this case, agents, putting requirements into the solution. And then through the use of the sprints, quickly seeing how that works. That's going to be critical for AI, right? Bringing business and technology together and doing it in a rapid fashion so you can model out those changes, see them, put controls in place, make sure those changes are where you want them, the data is where it needs to be. but to realize value quickly. Because when you're sitting down, you're thinking about, as because the business told you, we're only investing if there's value. You want to track to that value over time, and you want to see the benefit of that value quickly. And so that's where I've seen it most recently. I have to say, really over time in technology, when you can build that partnership between business and IT, and so that those distinctions really kind of go away over time and build a one team model, that's where you're going to find the most success.
Love that. Shanti, I bet you've got some great insight just thinking from a development standpoint and your expertise in technology.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to see humans get over their reluctance to accept evidence-based decisions and to actually use the evidence to drive the decisions. And it's really remarkable when you see a process that was mostly intuition and gut feel, and all of a sudden they start saying, oh, if we follow the recommendations of these models that we built, what happens? So a few years ago, we had a small data science team that was going to change the way we priced diesel fuel. So we partnered with one of the third largest rest stop provider. We got about 280 or so locations, and they couldn't even price diesel fuel every day because the three people who did it, usually only one would be doing pricing that day, so they would price 20 or 30 of their stores. Well, the market changes more quickly than that, and they couldn't react to it very quickly. They could sometimes raise prices, and they would work extra hard to do that if they saw a supply spike, but they didn't have a way to probe it out to say, hey, should I change because there's a road stoppage here and more people might be coming by? The first thing we did was understand, do we need separate algorithms for each of these locations? Can we use exogenous factors? So we brought all of these interesting things in, but there was still reluctance, right? There was reluctance to say, should we change the way we do this? And as we prove that out, so we start with a small sample. We're going to use these 5 locations. We're going to measure those against other locations and see if there's some lift there. As we get some lift there, let's bring this out further. As we can provide more and more evidence that there's margin to be gained, there's revenue to even. That doesn't always mean increasing price. Increasing price generally will lead to revenue, but it could drop the volume. So sometimes it was, hey, drop the volume so much that you'll bring more people. As you do this and you watch them be successful, then the minds start to change. And their president of pricing says, okay, I would call Andy up, but I still don't think it's going to work, but I see that it's working, so I guess we can keep doing this. And after a year, it was, what can you price in your place? What else can we use technology to help us do? And seeing that switch from, we used to do it this way, we're going to keep doing it this way based on how people feel about it, to, do we have new data that we can use to drive this forward? It was really exciting.
Yeah, just really quick on that funny story. He did call me and said, son, I've been pricing diesel since Nixon was president. There's no way your algorithms would do better than what we did. So that was our starting point, the point where he was a champion, to Shanti's point on the other end. It just, one other quick thing, I love, Rod, the point you made. It is interesting how roles now are starting to munge together, if that's a word, right? Product, technology, business, they're coming together, because now my daughter is in product. She's writing code, Claude Code. And one of her challenges now is, how do I keep these dev teams with enough opportunity to actually write? And so, and then getting closer to the business. And so now for business capability. So, Palantir, I always hate when people come up with cutesy names for things. Palantir calls it the forward deployed engineer. That's a multidisciplined person. But I think that cutesy name captures an important point that's happening in the industry, and that is this munging of roles and coming together. And I would encourage all of us to think about that. How do we all branch out, starting with where we're at and leveraging that capability, but then branching out into the other areas, the business, etc.
That really hits the partnership piece of why we're having this particular discussion, which is it's that partnership between business and technology, whether that's the technology side saying we need to be closer to the business to really understand what's happening. Now, traditionally, that was happening with some of your most senior developers. Part of the reason they were senior and good was they understood what they were doing and why. And it was harder for junior people to get that when they first joined, and with experience, then start to understand those things. So one of the unstated pieces of why the senior developers now are, when powered by AI, are so much more effective, is they were the ones who understood the business a little better and knew why they were doing the things they were doing and what was going to be measured and why that was important to the customers. So getting that into more of the technology organization is going to be very helpful.
I definitely see your point on that. And when I'm thinking though about technology getting into the hands of more and more, obviously technology is impacting the role of everyday users, whether it is in your personal life or whether it is in your business life. And we are finding that more and more employees are becoming part of the technology solution for their organization, helping to create solutions, whether they are using Claude Code or, using Cowork, whatever that might look like. But that's why I think it's an interesting perspective in how four of these together are no longer just a singular technology problem. So if each of you could just sort of name off the top of your head, is there a name for what this problem is? Is it business process? Is it technology? Is it data? Is it, IT? Where is there a name for what we are all facing now? Because it has become a collective use and a collective brain of so many users within organizations participating in technology for the first time.
I mean, I think the silo walls are coming down a little bit because business users are getting more involved in the technology decisions. They want to understand what they're using it, how that's going to make what they're doing better, more efficient, faster, bring in more revenue, reduce cost, whatever it is. And the technology side wants to bring in technology that people will actually use. They don't want to just build things for the sake of building them, usually. You want to build things that people use because that's going to bring more value to the organization. And those things are getting closer together. And I think some of the skills are becoming more democratized in terms of how you do that. It's less magic because anybody can kind of look up, what does that actually mean? And they won't be able to necessarily do it, but they have a better understanding and a better way to get that understanding. Why might somebody suggest I should do it this way? Or why might this be a bad idea? That information is more available now than it was previously.
Yeah, I think the problem is creativity and imagination. That's what we need more of. And I think, one of the things, for example, we say, even to CEOs of companies that we're working with, you should be using Claude Code. You should be using Cowork. And one particular CEO did exactly that. And he came away from it with a completely changed mindset of what they should be doing, who they were as a company, and how fast they should be moving. But it doesn't just apply to the business. It applies to IT as well. Now we have the opportunity as technologists to really be the imaginative partners in telling the business, this is how you could take advantage of this technology. Now I understand your business. I understand your business processes. And here's what we can do. So I think it is an opportunity and a wake-up call for all of us to re-energize and get involved and bring ideas to the table. So I would call it a lack of imagination problem, or the best companies have a great imagination. And just one quick example, if you look at a company and they blame AI for their layoffs, that's a huge red flag, right? That's lack of creativity. You're telling me you couldn't use those people in a creative way, the rest of the organization that's addressing adjacent markets? And it's just a lazy proxy to try to survive this period. And it's in that laziness, I think, is what could potentially inhibit the growth of AI. We need more creative people. We need more of us in the creative process, driving these ideas, the art of the possible. And that's the fun upside of what we're trying to do collectively as a group here in this room.
I'll let that rock. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was listening to Andy talk about that, and a couple of things came to mind. But the first thing that I'm still struggling with is munge a word? Does anyone know if munge is actually a word?
I need some nods. Just nod. There.
If anyone's learning, let's have a discussion.
I definitely used it.
But I think this distinction in role, it's as Andy was talking about it. I think it's still in work, right? There are still domain expertise that individuals bring to the table. And what I think, from a cautionary standpoint, when people say it's low code, no code, which it can be a euphemism from we don't need IT, I'm not sure that's the case, right? Maybe IT's role is changing and how quickly we create code, maintain code, etc. But it still needs to be maintained. It still needs to be done in a professional manner. Now, that being said, the smartest BAs that I ever worked with, or even testers back years ago when I worked a lot in testing, there would be folks who would move up in the business. Why? because they learned the processes that the business has, how it runs, a lot better than some of the folks that were doing it. And I think part of it is because they got underneath the covers, right? They really need to understand the business rules, how the organization works, how diesel is sold throughout, a day when the market is open, how it sells over time. So you have expertise that I think belongs in multiple places. It comes a bit interchangeable, right? A bit, but it's not fungible, if that makes sense, right? And so I think what we're seeing from an employee standpoint is kind of we're all becoming enhanced through AI, right? I think we can enhance our productivity, we can enhance our sharpness, we can gather more data, like Shanti said, so we can test out hypotheses quickly, we can move forward in that way. Now, when we talk about, when we think about barriers, I think, imagination is an important one Andy talked about. But if you're in a publicly traded company, imagination comes with cost. So I think where folks need, what they need is a license to fail, right? And we used to talk about this a lot in the early e-commerce days, or really as we started developing more digital products. Not everything's a winner. And I think for AI to be successful, there has to be that sandbox where folks can engage, learn these new skills, and have a license to fail too.
I love that license to fail statement. I'm also thinking of it as a license to dream. I've had the opportunity to coach universities and K through 12 school districts, and helping those administrators think about our next level of AI users and giving them the license to dream and utilize their brilliance and brains. Whereas before they may have been told, no, you can't do that. You don't have the education. We don't have that opportunity. Everybody can become a dreamer, but I think your point, Shanti, in particular, really hit home for those Andy, I'm sorry, those organizations that are doing those mass layoffs. It is an incredibly expensive investment to then rehire the people who are the tribal knowledge and foundation of your company, because you still need the human in the loop, the people who absolutely were the intellect behind the machine. You still have to be the orchestrator. You have to understand why your business was successful. But what I love about the opportunity is that it does allow people to stand up from their desk a little bit more and begin to connect at events like this, work with their colleagues a little bit more, look at people in the eye, connect face to face instead of spending 10 hours in front of a blue screen, which inevitably builds business, but it also builds a more cohesive planet of world business users. So let's move on, please, to thinking about the partnership model. So when business and IT are working together on AI, what does that look like? And what do you all think it requires from both sides? And Shanti, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think it requires that the business comes to the table with what are the business problems, and sometimes that's really understanding what it is that you're in business for, what are you doing, what are your drivers of success. It is amazing how many businesses that make that very unclear. They have a general idea of what they think they do. Those might not actually be the things that they're successful doing. They've got some mission, maybe. Usually they'll have some goals, but those goals can be very short term. There's few businesses that actually have a strong mission, values, and can actually go through here's our mission, here's the vision, what we're doing, here's the values that we're going to use to accomplish those things, and then here's the goals that underlie those and direct. But if the business that comes to the table and here's what we're trying to do, this is going to make us successful, this is what we need to do, then it's much easier for the technology side to say, great, here are things we're seeing, here's how we solve these types of problems, and we can approach this as a team. And that helps diffuse that information throughout as well, where now everybody understands what they're doing and why. And that's going to lead to much better solutions. Then you can start imagining, well, what if we did it this way? And usually that's not just because we've done it this way in the past, we should continue to. It's, well, we're doing it this way to accomplish this goal, but are there other ways to get there?
I think that makes sense. Rob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, as I was listening to Shanti talk, I was thinking to myself, that's what I've always dreamt of. But in reality, what often happens is you get a kind of a maybe draft of a business case or an idea, right? Drafty, if you will. And then you have an idea. Now, sometimes this is dangerous because, you might hear, well, I met with a salesperson or I went to a conference and I would like to know how this tool will solve this loosely defined problem for me. And IT, that you're going to do that for me, right? And so, I think our job in the IT side of that is to kind of understand a little bit enough of the business to kind of help bring that sketch of, what the problem statement is in a business case with a little bit more firmer walls around it. But then enough about, what particular technology, tactics, or strategies exist in that particular area to help them understand how they might leverage it. Because, you got to go from monologue to dialogue, right, quickly, because they're not typically going to be able to come and package it up for you.
Yeah, I love that. What it looks like. I'm just kind of building on what Rob and Shanti said. It's interesting. We're working with a company called Basis Research, and their CEO is very much one of these people that does have an imagination, does have a vision of the future. But even with that, when we first did our initial workshops with them, they happen to be based out of the UK. You could see in the room, nobody had to say what their role was. You could hear in their voices, okay, that's the IT team, that's the business team. And as they talked, it was very clear who was who. We did a workshop lately in the past 2 weeks, went over to London, and you couldn't tell who was who. Everybody was coming with ideas around the business. Everybody understood kind of the art of the possible. Now, was the business talking about the nuances of LLMs and why they hallucinate, no. But the conversation just looked and sounded different. And you can listen to these conversations and understand where you're at in your maturity curve. Is it the only data point? Of course not. But you get a lot out of when you hear these discussions, when you have that kind of symbiotic knowledge where it's not one side, the other side, one side saying we need to do this, this is why we can't, this is why we can't, this is what we need to do, but ideas coming to the table and saying, no, but we could do this, right? And so that, I think, is what good looks like.
No, I agree with that. And I'm even thinking from the perspective of when those are coming together as well, is within the organization, are the leaders also tapping into their entire team, understanding not that they've been the key stakeholders, but from the bottom up, what are the problems that need to be solved? What are the business use cases? And beginning to capture those and determine some solutions. How can AI also be a part of that? Part of that really truly though is up to the leaders to make those decisions, to listen, document, and have their team participate in the growth of the company and not just simply lead from the top down. It does become an board-wide change. And I think, change management is a complex topic, but in thinking about the perspective of all of the contributors, I think from a business standpoint and technology standpoint, they must stand together and they must understand and lean into where their strengths are. And I often have conversations with CIOs that say, I don't know, they told me I'm supposed to train everybody how to use the AI, so I gave them a slide deck. I don't know why they're not using it. That sentence pretty much says the example of why they're not using it, because they didn't think to bring teams together. And it is that sharing of knowledge. And I love your basis example of the tone in the room, the voices in the room all began to change. And I'm seeing that happening more and more. Let's shift topics now and talk a little bit more about data readiness and governance. So when we're thinking about data readiness, what's it actually require an organization to do to get started with AI? And how do you keep governance from becoming the thing that actually kills momentum? Andy, do you want to start this out?
Yeah. So obviously, LLMs are amazing at what they do. In other words, if you were to ask an LLM, pick your favorite one to summarize Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, it would do amazing, right? Ask it what sales were last quarter in Brazil, it'll be perfectly terrible. It'll probably try to give you an answer because they're trained to give you an answer, but they're trained on the internet. And so a key for readiness is teaching the model the semantic layers and give it the guardrails. So when you get that question that says, what is sales last quarter in Brazil, it knows to take this deterministic path, call this SQL, attach to this API, make these calculations, and it happens the same way every single time. And so having that deterministic framework around your LLM and having a semantic layer over your data so that it can describe itself and not just what the data is, a metadata like a Power BI type semantic layer, but a semantic layer that gives you the exceptions in the business, understand the rules. When this thing happens, 9 times out of 10, you go here, but if it's at this threshold, here's the different exception. And so that is where a lot of AI projects are failing, frankly. When you hear that 95% stat, I don't know if they calculated that out to the, 10th percentile, but just imagine a number of these things do fail, right? And they fail because of that exact problem. LLMs look deceptively good at answering questions, but inside of your business, you have to build these deterministic guardrails. And that's really where we spend most of our time daily. That's why it's such a passion topic for us. Is building those semantic layers so that LLMs can understand your business.
I heard they only fail 87% of the time.
We might spend a lot of time arguing amongst ourselves.
Which actually, I only say that because, and this could be the nerdiest thing I say today, the evaluation harnessing and coming up with a way to determine, are the results I'm getting from using this model actually reasonable? And are they repeatable? Is quite important. And that's a great area for technology teams to think about what's the extra value we can provide that isn't in a product that comes out of the box. And that can be, how is it that we're going to do evaluation and test harnessing for what our business users are doing? Because that's not easy. That's not a solved problem. Like, oh, all you do is you ask another model to double check your work. Or, hey, some user is going to have their model write some SQL that'll hit our backend database that's going to run this query that's going to give them a response. There's a lot of pieces to check along the way to make sure that works. How do we want to do that? Do we want to check the code itself and say like, oh yes, this is valid code, it'll run? Well, probably run. Models are very good at creating code that will run. Now, will it bring back results? Bring back some results. Will they mean what the user expected them to be? Probably, maybe. Depends on what your semantic layer is defined, how well your metadata is defined. Did the user actually ask the right question? In that they're going to get the results they wanted, which might be technically close, but not what they really were trying to measure. Much more thinking on that one.
Again, as I was listening to Shanti talk, I think that getting that model right, corrected once is where a lot of our efforts are. But then we take a step back, and say, can we repeat that? Is it reusable, right, over time? And I think that's going to be part of how you think about your data strategy. Right? You're not going to know all the permutations that are out there, but you have to factor for reuse, right? We don't want to create curated data sets that only work in a couple, 3 use cases. You want to be able to make sure you can think ahead to where that data comes, and that's only going to happen if that data is accessible, right? So do we have our hands around all of our enterprise data, and is it in a place where it's integrated? Right, so that you can pull data from different source systems or different systems of record, or across even third-party integration to be able to utilize that data, and from an access standpoint. And then, Shanti talked about a little bit of this, which is the scaling element of this, right? So as you're going through your individual use case, and then you're starting to build upon those, you're going to have to be able to do it in a way that's scalable. And if anyone thinks you can do that, I'm sure no one in this room would think that on premise, you're wrong, right? You better move your core systems to the cloud. You better do it quickly, or you're going to spend a lot on trying to generate that infrastructure through AI.
Yeah,
You just have to have a premise of a lot of GPUs.
The other thing I would just quickly say, we see in the industry is kind of 2 ditches on the sides of the road. One is those that think the data doesn't matter, I'll just throw my LLM at it, it will be fine. And then the other side is my data has to be perfect, and I spend all my time trying to make perfect data. And the reality is there's a huge middle of the road. And frankly, today, the tools that we have with AI, finding that middle of the road and making data good enough to solve the problem is absolutely the case. So I would just encourage everybody, I'm sure everybody here knows this, but avoid those 2 ditches. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do have to have an AI ready, and that semantic layer is a big part of it.
Well, I just quickly put my legal and or cybersecurity hat on, right? Both of them, and said, "What do you mean it can't be perfect, Andy?"
The outcome has to be perfect. The outcome for sure has to be perfect.
Now you can see why we probably have so much fun when we go out for lunch or a burger,
exactly.
because I'm going to fully argue that point and say, if you didn't explain to your people how to ask for the data and the strategies around requiring citations on where it got its results from, and then showing you full hyperlinked versions of all of its research, and then comparing and contrasting that with a secondary model, then your employees don't know what they're doing. So we're going to discuss this one later, guys.
I could definitely have a model make up those references, and then you have to go check them all.
Indeed, we are getting close to time, so I'm going to ask each of you to give me just some closing thoughts. And if anybody in this room is thinking about how they're going to go back to the office tomorrow, and they want to start doing something differently, what is the first thing? Not really a 12-month plan, but what's the first meeting, the first conversation, or even the first 30 days look like?
I would start with the fact that everybody today has more capabilities than they had yesterday. Well, maybe more than they had on the 12th before some of the months got worse. But you have more capabilities this week than you did previously. So as a business, how are you going to take advantage of the fact that all of your employees are now much more capable?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, it starts again, most of the folks here in this room are IT professionals. I would encourage everyone to go back to their business and kind of get out of the what we're doing and really focus on the why, right? How can, what are the biggest problems we have to solve from a customer standpoint? We haven't talked a lot today yet about the voice of the customer, but the voice of the customer always matters. What do they want, whether it's self-service transactions or something else that AI can be applicable for, and make sure that the things that we're building upon with AI are solving those problems. That would be what I would encourage them to do.
Yeah, no, just to build, I think that's a great point, Rob. And yeah, go to the business on Monday and develop ideas that you have that are aligned, right? And we coach IT professionals all the time and say, go take a look at what is the CEO talking about? What's important to the C-suite? And then take that and decompose and say, okay, what use cases, where can AI actually contribute to what my CEO is talking about, either to the investor community or internal forums, is connect what they're saying to what capabilities you can deliver and have those concrete ideas and have it in business terms. It's going to cost this. It's going to drive this outcome. Here's how we're going to measure it. It's not doing AI for AI's sake. It's furthering your agenda. And this is what we can do. And then, over time, what we're seeing with our clients is it becomes a self-funding roadmap. You're taking the savings or the upside on the revenue and reinvesting it into the next use case, So you're almost building a small startup, if you will. It's probably overstated, and I overstate things sometimes. But the small startup within your company. And so coming with ideas, talking in the business language, and then getting the business to start experimenting or enable on AI technology so they have a sense of what's possible. I guarantee most business executives, when they do that, a light switch flips. Sometimes for the good, sometimes it overflips. Now they think everything's super easy because they don't realize, let's go into an enterprise and all this stuff. But that switch being flipped is important as well.
I'm going to encourage you to go back, unless you are the owner or in the C-suite in this room. Go back and have a conversation with those key stakeholders. They are pressuring you to bring AI into the space and pressuring you to deliver ROI and those results. They actually need to determine what is their comfort level, what is their thoughts on what are they trying to deliver and what are their expectations of you. So I want to just see if we are running close on time, but do we have any just quick questions? Is there an easy crowd? Looks like we're ending pretty close to being on time. If you have any private questions for after the yes.
Any suggestions on how the business better?
Better communicate to IT, the business key stakeholders, the owners. They need to sit down, have a conversation, and lay out very clearly what does that roadmap look like, what are the expectations, and have a human conversation and not just make assumptions that you solve everything. You don't know.
Yeah, the other thing I love on it, I agree with Michelle. It could make that a workshop or whatever you want to call it. Sometimes workshops have bad names inside of organizations, but have that collaborative dialogue and say, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's a key pain point. Is this something where we could potentially apply AI or just analytics or some other technology solution? To Shanti's earlier point, not everything's an AI problem, right? And so, but here's the problem. How can we collectively solve that problem in that dialogue?
You may want to just start with, are you clear on what is important to us? Because they may not. And that'd be a good way to start that conversation.
Yeah, so starting at that high level, like here's what we're trying to accomplish and why, is a really nice way to get everybody involved in the problem solving, and people tend to be much more receptive to that as opposed to like, we want to do it this way, make it happen.
Yeah, sometimes it's just hard when you're under pressure.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
requirements and actually run the business and actually trying to.
And yeah, that's a very fair point. And sometimes when you talk on these panels, we talk as if there's no gravity, there's no weight resistance, right? So I get that. But then there's complications to everything we're saying. But it's a great point.
No, I appreciate you.
We're going to be at lunch after this, so if you want to have additional conversations, ask some questions, find us, and we really appreciate every help.